All right, folks, welcome to our next video on APIs and the document object model. Today what we're going to be working on is actually we're going to be connecting to an API for not exactly the first time. We've used Fetch before, but we're actually going to use another tool besides Fetch. That's if you've been in my prior JS core course. But we're going to be using another tool called Axios to get information back from a browser and send other information out. Should be pretty cool, and we're gonna get right into it. So no need to take forever. A lot of the theory here should be somewhat familiar if you've been messing around with, if you've been in any of Coding Temple's other courses. This is like one of the most important parts of web development, of application development in general, is getting our different applications to send data back and forth to one another, and to do so in a way that's safe, secure, consistent, predictable, and where we can actually use the information we get back. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I'm also going to point out that we are going to be using this URL, which you might have to end up typing out, but it's not too bad. Most of it's like real words. And this is going to be the information we get back. So if you were to type this URL, you might see something else here. But I have this extension called JSON view. So turn this backwards so we can actually see it. Just turn the colors off. That's very boring. But anyways, so we can see this JSON object, and if you've been with me for a little while, you know that JSON is JavaScript object notation. It's one of the most, if not the single most common way of passing information around on the web right now. And so that's why we're learning it. And basically we have a JavaScript object. It's like a dictionary in Python, but this is an object. It's a collection of keys and values. And this one is an array of objects inside of that array, and this whole thing is one object. So we're going to be parsing through this and figuring out ways to access this different data, like what is, I don't know anything about Power Rangers. My friend Joel made this for another course, and I'm just using his resources, because why pay for multiple servers? I just use the same one that already works. But we're going to use Tommy, because anyways. But yeah, so Tommy has color green, and has his Morp coins, and the season is from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I believe. But yeah, cool. So we got all these different things from Power Rangers, and we're gonna make a Power Rangers API here. So first thing we're gonna do is make an HTML index.html, index.html, and we're going to do bcdn5. Actually, let's do BCDN Ajax. I've actually never used that one, but this looks like it's the right thing. I changed my mind. Let's be safe about it. We're gonna use BCDN5, just like normal. Great, fine, cool, awesome. All right, so I got a little thrown off by seeing that stuff in there, but that's all good. We're gonna use the BCDN5, the newest Bootstrap JavaScript. Well, so Bootstrap actually is kind of cool. I think I've explained this before, but it's I'm not gonna get into that right now. Different lecture. You should already know that stuff. All right, so we're not going to use this particular file for style.css because we don't have an assets folder. So instead, I'm going to create my new one, new file. We're gonna have main.css, and all we're gonna put in here, and I'm being pretty quick with this because I'm trying to focus on the JavaScript today rather than this other stuff. So you can pause the video. Background dark salmon for everything, and the body's background is also gonna be dark salmon, which is gross. But I am not in designer mode, and I can't, if I start making things pretty, then I take all day long and I don't actually get anything done. So we're making it ugly on purpose, and we're just gonna ignore it. All right, so we're gonna do that, and what we want here is gonna be, we're gonna do slash Rangers API, we're gonna do main.css. So now our document should have a nice pink hue. And we have these other script tags that bring Bootstrap in. That's great. We want one more script tag in here, and that is going to connect our impending JavaScript. So we're going to say script source, and this is going to say main.js, and we're going to put in defer because we have multiple scripts going here, and so we want to say, make sure that it's known that this is like the main script here. So that's all good, and now we need to make our main.js. Great, marvelous, and now everybody will be happy. So if I were to open this file over here, that's what I wanted. Nope, I want a new file. And this one's going to be in Rangers API, index.html. So this should be here. Nothing should be happening. Main.css, error not found. That needs to be... Why not? Why wouldn't you know where that is? It's right there. Why are you said? Okay. We're just going to not put it in here. Let's do that. That should work. There we go. Cool. Now everything's salmon. Hooray. All right. So what are we going to put inside the body here? First, we're going to have h1, and the class is going to be p5. So we have some padding, and it's going to say making API calls with JS. Yay. All right. And we're going to move on. We're going to have, oh man, I am just butterfingers today. All right. So we're going to have a Ranger data HTML element. I don't care that it's not a Python source file. I'm not trying to run Python. Please leave me alone. So we're going to have div.container. And in our div container, we're going to have div.row. And in our div.row, we're going to have div.call-12. And then call or actually another dash with, oh, look at that. Call-md-12. That's saying that when our screen size is a medium size, and we want 12, and otherwise we just want regular 12 columns. Actually, not sure why that's in there off the top of my head, but I'm sure we'll find out later. I'm going to do button.btn and then button primary for the color. And this will say get data, and then we'll have another button, and button dash danger, and this will say clear data. Great. And then we're going to have a section, and it's going to have a class list group, and then Ranger list. And what's going to be in here, and we're just not going to put anything in here yet, right? So this is going to be this empty thing. We're going to be able to use these classes later to inject more code with JavaScript. And so that's basically all we need to do here. One other thing we need to do is need to add on click events to both of these. So I'm actually just going to highlight. Nope, I'm not. I'm going to say on click equals, I'm going to use, goodness gracious, load data, which is not a function that exists yet. So we're going to have to write that, and that should tell you where we're going. On click, and we're going to have clear data. Hooray! All right, great. So now we got both of those things. Now we're going to go to main.js and actually start writing some cool stuff. So the first thing we need to do is get our actual data back so we can do something with it. So that's our first step, right? Step one, get the data from the source. All right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to say const get data equals async, woo-woo. Because we don't want this to happen immediately. We want to wait until something happens. What are we waiting on? Well, particularly we're waiting for the data to arrive. So we're going to actually make the request, kind of like we used fetch before to do this. Now we're going to use axios.get. We'll see how that works in a moment. But it's going to request information from someplace and wait until that comes back. And then once that data is back, then it's going to finish the function. And it's going to happen when we click it, because we don't want this to occur right when we load the page. We want it to wait until somebody clicks on the data, then it's going to go and get the data, and then it's going to bring it back and we're going to see what happens. So I'm going to say let response equals await, and again, await says this is the thing we're waiting on. So async makes sure that it doesn't occur automatically, and then await says this is the thing we're waiting on. We're going to use axios.get, and hopefully this is actually installed here, but we're going to take that URL from here. Pass it in. Should be all we need for that. I think it's just, yep, that's all good. Okay, so we can get that back. And then we're going to say console.log response.data. Okay, and we're going to return it as well. Response.data. And because we're returning it, now anywhere that we use this getData function, we're going to be able to utilize that data someplace else. So even if I call it somewhere else, I'll be able to use that. And keep in mind that in our index.html, we did not use get data, we used load data. So there's still a couple functions we have to actually write. This is actually a helper function that actually just gets the data and returns it. So that's great. Next thing we're going to do, step two, prepare constants to hold DOM elements. Right, so we got to get stuff ready to go. Const DOM elements equals, and this is going to be an object. I'm going to say ranger list. I'm going to say this is dot ranger dash list. And so this is going to include, not that we're going to end up basically taking this class and we're going to give it some attributes. Those attributes are going to be inside of this DOM element. We'll see how this comes back in a moment, right? So step 3 is create ranger list HTML, right? So now we're going to say const create list equals, and we're going to pass in an ID and a name, arrow function, and this is going to be const HTML equals, and we're going to use a tick mark, and we're going to pass in a href equals, we're not going to go anywhere with this, and then we're going to say class equals list group item, list group item action, list group item light, and what else we got here? And that should be pretty close. Light was the last one, and then we're going to give it an ID. This ID is going to be ID. And again, this is going to be pulling this from what we fed it, right? So we're actually injecting whatever the ID is, we're actually going to put that into this HTML item. And we're going to finish this tag here in a moment. So we're going to finish with the ID, and finish our quotations, and then we're going to say, what do we want inside of this? We're going to put name. And then we're going to close our A tag. Okay, so this means that when we do create list, we're going to make an HTML, and we're going to have our ID and name. What are we going to do with this exactly? Well, we're going to use document.querySelector, and we're going to pass in DOM elements.rangerList. So again, this is going to be pulling back whatever's at that class. So this is going to go and grab the section. It's going to pull this back as a whole chunk, bring it back here, insert it in here, and what are we going to do with it? We're going to insert adjacent HTML. And where are we going to put it? We're going to put it before the end. And what are we going to pass it for actual HTML to feed it? We're going to pass it some HTML. There's a lot going on here. If you didn't track with all of that, that's okay. Not all APIs work exactly like this. This is just how we've chosen to do it. What's essentially happening is, again, we are generating HTML from nothing. It's also very common to have things ready to go where it would expect data and put that data in quickly. And again, you're noticing that we're creating a lot of content. We'll see if you're with me for React and Vue that there's ways of using JavaScript to do this a little more elegantly. But this is also a very good way without having to use a ton of extra memory and work to use a framework to insert data into something. So, and per usual, if you don't understand what insert adjacent HTML means, you can just Google that, look at the documentation, and say, oh, that's what that means and what's going on here. It's totally fine. And so this is just how we're targeting that specific thing. So that's all good. All right, so last thing we're going to do, actually we have two more functions here. Step 4, load data and display the HTML. Okay, so here's we're going to have const load data equals async, async, and we're going to not pass anything in. We're going to have an arrow function, and what we'll do here is we're going to have const rangers equals await, and we're going to await get data. Okay, so all of the data that we're pulling back from this URL, so this whole JSON thing, we're going to get it, we're going to parse it as response.data, we're going to feed it to rangers. So rangers is going to have all that information now. And then we're going to use a for each loop where we run this create list thing on the ID and name, and we're going to run that over our rangers. We're going to say rangers.forEach This is, again, very good functional programming here. Element. And we're going to take each element. And we're going to create list. And we're going to pass in for the ID, element.id. And element.name. And keep in mind, you say, where did that ID and where did that name come from? Well, that actually came from these, right? Each element in this list has an ID and a name. So we're going to actually be able to use those attributes and create a tag for each of those, which is great. So now we've done that, and that's our load data. And so our load data should work now. What if I can get rid of it? Well, you say const clear data equals arrow function, where we're going to use document.query selector dom elements .ranger list. I'm going to say .inner HTML. I'm going to set it equal to nothing. Okay, and the reason why we're doing it this way and setting it to an empty string is now the HTML is not going to have any value. It's just going to be the same as like an empty div. There's not going to be anything there. There's ways to completely obliterate this, but we don't want to obliterate it because what if we want to put stuff back in again later, right? And so essentially we're going to be taking this ranger list thing and inserting HTML or removing that HTML based on our different functions, our load data and clear data functions. So let's go ahead and test this. Let's head back over here to title and refresh the page. And now we have making API calls with JavaScript. We can go to get data. And Axios is not defined. All right, so I'm going to pause the video and debug this real quick because this might be more than a 2-second solution. All right, that was a great deal of headachey. Okay, so we're still going to use Axios. A couple things that are going on. First of all, I'm now using a live server, which is an extension that I have called Live Server. Sorry, I should talk into the microphone. It's called Live Server. I would have loved to have talked you through how I solved all that, but it took me like 45 minutes, which it really shouldn't have, but it did. So anyways, so Live Server now. We have this thing, and what it allows me to do is down here at the bottom, it will say start live server. So if we go back to index.html, I can actually right click here and open with live server, or I can click go live down here. It'll pull it open, port 5500, and I can refresh this page. Oh, that was the old one. Whee. Man, I had every evil, nasty bug in the book show up at once. So here we got our page. I'm going to right click and inspect real quick so we can see what's going on here. And that doesn't matter. That's just it being grouchy about something else. But the important line here is this one. And so it's a pretty straightforward thing. This is actually from their cloud delivery network, which allows, so they've got like close to where you live, there's somewhere near you, there's a data center, and they have a version of Axios installed on that. And so you can just say, hey, local data center, can you send me this information? And it will come from that, and it will be very quick because you don't have to get it all the way from California. So if you live in England, you can get that much faster because there's actually, that cloud delivery network actually has stuff in London and Ireland. So you can get that information to your computer, to your application from here and use it as another JavaScript script. Please note that now we have defer here because we do have several other scripts going on our document between Bootstrap and Axios now. And what we're going to want to do is access our main.js with defer, saying this is where our defaults come from. This is like our main thingummy here. And then we can look at main.js and we should have that. So now that we're using the live server, again, we should have a slightly different URL than just the file type because otherwise if you just had the file type, we would end up with what's called cross-object referencing problems, CORS problems, and that's where only permitted entities are allowed to actually give us information, and that keeps, again, it keeps hackers from being able to just use JavaScript to read our files. That also means that my browser can't always necessarily read all the files that I use. So this is a more elegant way. It takes a little bit more computer power, and since the recording software I'm using also takes a lot of computer power, I didn't want to run them both at once, but for right now we will. And when I click get data, you'll see that this all drops down, and we console log an object with all of that information. And I can also, you can click on them and nothing happens really. This is just HTML defaults, by the way, the little gray dots. And then go to clear data, and it goes away. And you can do it again, and it makes another API call, and gets that information. You clear the data, and it goes away again. So, pretty cool stuff. That is basically our intro to APIs in about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more. I think it was, what, 2 videos, 1 video? I don't remember. It's not that much. But that is our API, and that's how we would do that. And so, again, we're just loading data, doing a loop over our HTML, and then spitting it back out again and closing that out and making it to nothing. And that's all that's happening. It's pretty cool. So hopefully that was cool. We're going to be doing some more APIs and connecting to some more examples of those here in the near future. Should be rad. I'll see you in the next video.